Good evening and welcome to this Mitcham Community Forum meeting. We have 6 agenda items on the meeting agenda tonight. I would first of all like to welcome all of you here, and I hope you have an enjoyable evening. Chris, are there any apologies for absence?
I haven't recorded any, but might be. No, I don't think I've got any.
No apologies. Okay. Well, let's get started on agenda item 2, and that is an update from the leader of the council, Stephen Allen-Brittis. Stephen, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Mitcham Community Forum and to Chris for making the arrangements for my annual leaders presentation to these important events. What I'll do tonight is talk about COVID and how we're dealing with it, give some facts and figures, and I know that later on Barry will also add a latest update. I'll then talk about some other issues, including the latest on St Helier Hospital, the fact that we've passed the climate change emergency motion, and talk a bit about our new mayor, Sally Kenny, the fact that the borough commander stepped down. We have a new borough commander in this chapel, and then talk about some issues that are coming to the fore for the area in Mitcham. And I know you have agenda items covering emissions, Cannons Heritage Park project, and the local updates, Wilson Health Centre and Rowan Community Facility. So there is plenty to chew on there, so I'll begin. Sadly, and our thoughts go out to all the family relations who have lost loved ones in this awful pandemic, COVID-19. And here in the London Borough of Merton, we're informed that tragically 205 people have died, passed away as a result of COVID-19. That is certainly tragic and sad news, and our thoughts and prayers are with all those families, friends, colleagues of loved ones. Today, the Evening Standard carried a story about the pandemic coming to London and to Southwest London in particular, and Barry will go into what we're doing lately, but I just wanted to say that although Merton is at a low end and second lowest for infections throughout London after Sutton, we are, for example, 40 cases per 100,000 here in Merton, whereas Richmond is 100 cases per 100,000 of population. But we're all in this together, as we say, and I should be meeting with all the leaders of all the London boroughs to look at what we can do, because people do work in other boroughs, they go to school in other boroughs, and they come back to our beloved borough. But it is good news that we're low, but we're going up, it's increasing, and that is the worry. But the council, with all the volunteers and all the people who are helping, and we can't do without those volunteers, and all the residents taking precautions, will do all it can to safeguard and protect our residents. Now we know that COVID-19 is having a disproportionate impact on our Bain community here in Merton, in London, and throughout the country. And our public health team, working with one of our directors, Rachel Wardell, is doing a piece of work to see how we can address these inequalities. And I know residents will be pleased to know and will have noticed that heroic attempt by Patrick Hutchinson, not an attempt, a successful action on his part, heroic action to safeguard and save a counter-protester. Patrick Hutchinson lives in Croydon but works here in Merton, and therefore the two boroughs I've been in conversation with the leader of Croydon Council, Councillor Tony Newman, and the two boroughs are working up a recognition for Patrick Hutchinson that we should hear about very soon. Barry will have all the latest figures, but I understand we've helped as a council some 7,000 residents who have been shielding. One of the things we've done, and I want to thank all the staff here at the London Borough of Merton who have played their part in helping defend and protect residents from the pandemic. And a number of staff we have redeployed so they can be in that position away from their normal place and duties. One of those sectors is our bailiff team, who normally would go out and knock on a door and hand you a writ or demand money from you that you owe the authorities. But on this occasion, we've asked them to stop that, and they're knocking on your door to deliver food or help or medicine. And that's one of the ways in which our staff have helped out in this pandemic. And I want to thank the food banks here, and in particular Don's Local Action Group, who are part of AFC Wimbledon, the food bank at Commonside in Pollard's Hill, which is working well, and also MVSC, Merton Voluntary Service Sector in Vestry Hall, again another organisation that is helping a lot of people. We do provide and have provided 2 million items, free items of PPE to our care homes, and we've jointly gone in with all other 32 London boroughs in a huge procurement project that is a contract for the purchase of 50 million items of PPE. I'm pleased that the government has given us money to protect rough sleepers, and we have accommodated and put into accommodation 52 rough sleepers. Some have decided to stay in our streets, and we've respected that, about 6, but the vast majority are now in accommodation, and we would urge the government to continue to support us in that way so that they don't go back onto the streets, that they do stay in accommodation. So I want to thank the government for providing that funding to take them off the streets, but I would urge them to continue to provide funding so that they stay in that accommodation. The schools have gone back to their classrooms. The children are back at school. All Mitcham libraries have opened. Our Garth Road Recycling Centre and Reuse Centre is open. You need to book during the weekdays, but weekends there is no need to book in advance. All our park facilities are open, and I'm pleased to say again, the government has given us money to help small businesses, but the trick of the trade here is how fast, how quick, how efficient has that local authority been in giving that money out. And I'm pleased to say that Merton was 3rd in London for speed with which it came to the help of small businesses using the money given to us by the government. And we've allocated 28 million or so pounds worth of grants, non-repayable. These are grants, this is money to help small businesses, to some 2,000 plus businesses here in Merton. There's still a long way to go in our relationship with the government on COVID-19. The government said, do whatever it takes to protect residents from the pandemic. And we have done that, and we have protected residents, and we will continue to do so. But that is costing us a lot of money, not only in the cost of providing that service, that protection, but in the foregone cost of the fact that we're not having income coming in that would normally be the case, and our staff are not working on cost savings because they're out there protecting the public. So I do hope that the government will reimburse local authorities, all local authorities in the country, including London and Merton in particular. Otherwise, we will be in very, very serious problems with our finances. So I would urge the government not to go with their statements that you should have done what was required and then they decide what was required or not. We've done whatever it takes, and we should be refunded on that basis. Now to some, Barry will add other items on that update. some non-COVID issues. So I'm pleased to say that although there are issues with St Helier Hospital, we do welcome the £500 million of investment, but we believe the majority of that, or that should be used in such a way that protects all the services at St Helier Hospital. And at this moment in time, if the government got its way and the NHS bureaucrats got their way, there would be an investment of £500 million, but it would mean that the new hospital would be in Belmont, in Leafy Belmont, in Sutton, and St Helier Hospital would be downgraded and would go without an A&E and without children's maternity. So we've written to the Secretary of State for Health, Matt Hancock, and he has referred the matter to the independent reconfiguration panel. We wait to see what they have to say there. I'm pleased to say we have a new mayor in Councillor Sally Kenny. The mayor of the borough is the first citizen of the borough. It's a very important role, representing the ceremonial side of the borough and the voluntary side in particular. And good luck to her. And also, whilst we've lost the borough commander for the BCU unit, that's Sally Benatar, we welcome Liz Chappell in her place. And finally, the Cabinet has passed a climate emergency motion and emergency strategy. It will cost £88 million to get the council as a building and on all its buildings carbon neutral by 2030, but it would cost the whole borough, everyone, all houses, retrofitting houses, to get us carbon neutral by 2050. That would be £3 billion. So we would urge the government to look at the importance of climate change and fund that as well. We're ready to go, provided the money is there. There have been some changes that have caught residents by surprise. That's low traffic networks and school streets, and that's under the emergency proposals of the government, especially school streets, where local authorities have been asked to do something, put it in practice, and then consult. And that's taken a lot of residents off guard because they're used to us consulting, quite rightly so, with them first. But on this occasion, the government has said, put the thing in place and then consult and see how people view it. One is school streets, where we're trying to protect children who are being dropped off and picked up from schools from idling cars and all the fumes that that involves. And the other one is to address rat runs and this reliance on cars, to see how we can encourage people to cycle and to walk in particular. And the school streets in Mitcham in particular are Beach Home, Date Valley, Gorringe Park, St Mark's Primary, Stamford, the Sherwood, William Morris. Please do check our website on that. There are a number of exemptions for school streets and you know, blue badge holders and so on, and disabled people can, and residents who live there can apply free of charge for permits so that they can go about their business. So look up on our website for those issues. That's it from me. I'm very happy to take any questions. Thank you for being here, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Stephen. Is anyone wanting to ask any questions?
So, Chair, if anyone would like to ask questions, if they can put that in the chat function,
Okay.
if they're on Zoom with us, and then we'll pick up on those texts, and that's for either Councillor Allen-Brittis or any of the speakers this evening. And
Chair.
if anyone is watching on YouTube, they can email their questions in to getinvolved@merton.gov.uk. That's all one word, to get involved, and then I'll pick those up and add those to the chat as well.
Yes,
Chair, can I just add just one more item?
Go on.
With your permission. Although this new football stadium by Wimbledon, AFC Wimbledon, is in Wimbledon Park Ward, and nevertheless it is a big story for all of us. So I'm pleased to announce that AFC Wimbledon are coming back to Plough Lane with a now 9,000-seater stadium, with all the investment in the area, plus 800 housing units. And we understand that their first match back at Plough Lane after they were kicked out unceremoniously up to Milton Keynes will be, we believe, if all goes well, in liaison with the local authority, with Merton, on various issues. That first match, historic match, will be on the 3rd of November of this year. A big plus for the whole community, for all the council, for all the parties. There was an all-party motion encouraging the return of AFC Wimbledon back to the borough. Whilst we're seeing clubs in trouble, Bolton, Wigan, Bury, struggling and with their future, it's a real good story that a club kicked out with the help of this borough, its residents, the fans, everyone pulling together. The club is on its way back to Plough Lane. And I know a lot of residents in Mitcham are ardent AFC fans. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Stephen. As Chris has said, the questions will be submitted through the chat box, and anybody who wants to send in any questions by email. And I trust that there will be a number of questions that you'll probably have to answer in response to your excellent presentation. Thanks again for your presentation, Stephen. It would not be untoward to say that at this point, we want to thank you for all the work you've put in to the Mitcham Forum. We're going to miss you, but thank you very much for the excellent work that you put in the past. Okay, if we can now move on to agenda item 3, COVID-19 update, and that's going to be by Barry Corser. Barry.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you this evening. I believe that Chris is able to put some slides up. There we go. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chris. Hello, everybody. My name is Barry Corser. I'm the Head of Strategic Commissioning in the Merton Public Health Team, and delighted to meet you this evening at the Mitcham Community Forum. Next slide, please, Chris. Aims and purpose of this evening. I'm going to go through relatively briefly, give a brief overview of the key messages related to Merton, building on what Councillor Alan Brittas has already told us this evening. I'm going to give a brief overview of outbreak control and the plans and the network that we have in place to keep ourselves, our families and our communities safe within Merton. Then I'm really going to talk about some really important messages about community involvement and action to prevent outbreaks, but also to mitigate the health harm of COVID-19. And then I'm really delighted to talk about our Merton Community Champions with you a little bit later, which is a key part of our outbreak prevention, because it's an absolutely critical part that we work with and listen to the community in our response to COVID-19. And then I'll do my best to answer any questions that you might have for me. Next slide, please, Chris. This is a very text-heavy slide, so apologies this evening. The key message, Stephen Allenbus has covered this already, but this is a really important point, that within Merton, the numbers, the cases per 7-day are low. They are one of the lowest in London at this stage, but cases are increasing within Merton and across southwest London, which is following the trend across the rest of London. Really concerningly, NHS indicators are also increasing across southwest London. So that's admissions of patients with confirmed COVID-19 and unfortunately patients requiring intensive care. What I can say is that London is monitoring that situation very closely and reviewing the need for potential further control measures. So that's City Hall, the national government, and as Councillor Alan Brittas said, the leaders of the local authorities are in those conversations too. On a more local basis, thinking about the outbreaks and the cases that we've had, there have been a very small number of outbreaks in settings. So within Merton, so that's workplaces. There have been outbreaks in schools and care homes, but these are relatively modest and small numbers, thankfully. What we can say, looking at the data, is that the vast majority of cases are assumed to be from community transmission, which what that effectively means is it's transmission within and between households. So this is a really important message for us, because when we hear in the press about those further control measures that are put in place in many places, and potentially in London relatively soon, those initial control measures are about limiting household mixing. So that's essentially why community transmission is really important. Or being aware that how those cases are being transmitted is really important to us. But what we can say with community transmission is that the small actions have a massive impact on the strength of any second wave that might happen across London. These are the same messages that you've heard me and my colleagues in public health and the NHS talk about throughout this pandemic. But these are absolutely simple but effective measures to tackle COVID-19. These are around social distancing, good hand hygiene, adhering to the rule of 6 and wearing a face covering. These do really work to prevent and to break those chains of transmission. Key message again is to, if you have any symptoms at all that are based around coronavirus, and I'll talk to you again a little bit later on what they are, self-isolate immediately and book a test as soon as you possibly can. Okay. Testing capacity has been a challenge recently. I can't avoid not saying that. But the other Friday, when London as a whole was identified as an area of concern, what that means is that testing capacity for London, so our Merton residents, has increased. We've worked hard to, there is now a local testing site within the borough boundaries. And so our residents that have symptoms, and only those that have symptoms, can now access a test, and those spots are bookable via the national portal. Really important to say that all those slots are available via the national portal, which I have got a bit later on in the presentation. You cannot walk into these to get a test for COVID-19. The final key message before I move on to the more community actions is that it's been incredibly difficult, hasn't it? It's been incredibly difficult over the last few months. And we are facing up to a very difficult and challenging autumn and winter. Now's the time to put a virtual arm around each other, to support each other, and to consider as individuals, how can we make a valuable contribution towards limiting the spread of coronavirus in Merton. I can see a question's popped up. I'll try to answer that at the end if that's okay, Chair. Next slide, please, Chris. Thanks, Chris. We have a plan. That's the link to our plan within Merton. We have a local outbreak control plan. This was published back in June. And the plan essentially sets out how we are going to protect our community. It describes how we're going to work in partnership with the NHS Test and Trace service. And essentially what we've done within that plan is we've identified high risk settings, and we've contacted those settings, such as care homes and schools and other high risk settings, to get in contact with them so that we can work with them on risk assessments, so that they know what to do if they get a case and what they need to do if they get an outbreak. So we've been very proactive in our approach within our outbreak control plan. And really importantly, across those themes that you can see towards the bottom of the slide, is about community and vulnerable people. We want to work, and it's an absolutely core component of the approach that we've taken in Merton to engage with the community, to work with the community really closely. You can look at the plan. That's the link. I'm happy to have any conversations outside of the meeting on the content of the plan. The initial timeline for that plan is up until the end of March. And as I've already kind of said, this is at least because we are expecting a particularly tricky autumn and winter period. It's getting a little bit colder. People start spending a little bit more time indoors than they did over summer. Flu season starts, a little bit more coughs and splutters can increase the risk of virus transmission. So going back to those simple key messages, next slide, please, Chris. These are the real practical stuff. And again, I have told you this already, but I'm going to recover these if that's okay with you. And I'm also really keen to share this infographic with you so that you can share it with your networks, your family, your friends, and your newsletters if you have them. But our top 6 tips for Londoners, and you've heard these before, but so apologies, but I'm going to keep going over them. Stick with the rule of 6. Wear a face covering, so mask up where you're required to. Wash your hands on a regular basis. When you get home from work, when you go to the office, once you've eaten, before you've eaten, all those different things is really important because washing your hands destroys this virus. Keep your distance, check your symptoms, and that final one on the bottom right I've kind of touched on, but it's going to be a tricky autumn and winter. Let's work and look after each other within Merton. Next slide, please, Chris. So community action, what can we do together to prevent outbreaks? The symptoms, I've touched on the word symptom before, but these symptoms that we all need to remind ourselves are high temperature, a new continuous cough, or loss of change or smell and taste. And as I mentioned earlier, as soon as you see these symptoms, isolate and get a test. A personal story, if that's okay. My daughter was having breakfast last Thursday, I think it was, and said, "My shreddies taste a bit weird, Daddy." I said, "Okay." Made her some toast, still thought it tasted a bit weird. Gave her a yogurt, still a bit weird. We made the call. We isolated that morning. We stayed at home. We got a test for her, and it did come back negative. I'm pleased to say. But to be able to spot those symptoms and follow that guidance is about self-isolation and request a test. If you do need to request a test because you're symptomatic, you can do it in 2 ways. You can go to the coronavirus website, which is there, or if you don't have access to that, you can phone 119 and they will arrange for a booking at a local test centre or send you one in the post. One of the key services that protect us all is NHS Test and Trace. And what happens is if you have a test and you have a positive result, Test and Trace will contact you by email, could be text message or phone. And what they will say is, can you give us the contact details of anybody you've had a close contact with? So close contact is, for example, being close to someone for 15 minutes, so under 2 meters for 15 minutes, but they will go through that information with you. So if you're contacted by someone, by Test and Trace, asking for the contact details, please give them those details. It helps break that chain of transmission. Sorry. The second part of the Test and Trace service is that you might have been identified as a close contact. So you may get an email or a text message saying you've been in contact with someone that has a positive case, and it asks you to self-isolate for 14 days. It won't say you've been in contact with Barry Causa, for example. It will just give it a general message that says you have been in contact, and it will ask you to self-isolate. Again, this is a really important message. These services protect us and our families and our communities, so please comply with that regulation. The third component of Test and Trace, lots in the press. We can't avoid it. The NHS COVID-19 app has been launched. I think the latest number that I saw was 14 million people had downloaded that app. There have been some hiccups along the way. What I would ask you to do is to use the app, download the app, use the QR codes when you check into a facility that has them. It's an electronic version of Test and Trace. It does help keep us safe. So do persevere with that app, please. The other component of community action, is around being aware of fraud. So again, we talk a lot about protecting vulnerable people. And there have been some instances, unfortunately, of fraud. And we've had a very small number of cases within Merton, but we have heard these stories across London. For example, you might get a phone call from someone saying, "I'm from Test and Trace," and you've been in contact with someone with a positive test. And so I need to send you a test. The test is free, but I just need your bank details or the long card number across the middle of your debit card, for example, just to pay for the postage. That is fraud. It's not the case. Testing and the postage is absolutely free. And the key message there, if you get those contacts, will come from NHS Tracing and the phone number that's on the screen. And again, we're working to get those messages out on fraud prevention. Okay. Another community action, what we can all do to prevent outbreaks, is to get the latest information and guidance. So I would encourage everybody to sign up to the Merton COVID-19 newsletter. And what I'll ask you to do is that's the website that you could go on to so that you can sign up to that newsletter. It's got all the latest information and guidance. And if London is moving towards further control measures, I think that's going to be a really helpful way for us to communicate with many of our residents very easily and quickly. Next slide, please, Chris. Thank you. Then we talk about the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 and so how we can reduce the health impact of this disease. Key message again for us, and we've seen it in the comms that's been coming out, the NHS is open. If you are worried, please call your GP or use NHS 111. These are really important messages. Again, the services are there, they are open. They are delivering in a different way than normal, but they are able to there to support us and help us. Another key message for us is to get COVID fit, to reduce the risk of complications. We are really fortunate in Merton. We have good commissioned services, both from ourselves in public health and across the council and the NHS to support people to eat healthily or lose weight. To stop smoking, One New Merton, our stop smoking service, support many people to stop smoking, many of whom have tried themselves and failed. It's a good quality service, so we'd encourage people to do that. We're going to get more messages coming out soon on that. And increase your physical activity levels. And again, thinking about what we can do to reduce that health impact. One of the really important things that we can do is to manage long-term conditions. So again, we're working closely with our clinicians, our GPs and primary care colleagues so that we can build on the work that the Health and Wellbeing Board within Merton has done over the last couple of years on tackling diabetes. And then as well as physical health, it's important to talk about our mental health. I think I've mentioned this already, but it has been very tricky for many people, some more than others. Again, we do have good services around mental health and wellbeing. There's good quality digital services as well, so if people wanted to identify and take part in those. Final message about reducing that health impact going into a tricky autumn and winter period is please get your flu jab. If this is the first year you've ever done it, this is the year to do it, please. Many groups do get this free of charge, but there will be some available from some employers within the borough and from the employers where you work, and you can get them from community pharmacy. There is a staged and staggered approach to the flu vaccination program, but it's an important, if you get that offer, I would encourage you to take that up. Next slide, please, Chris. Thank you. I'm delighted to talk about the community champions with you. This is one of the highlights of my week, meeting with our community champions, to be honest with you. COVID-19, as I've said, the key part of the approach is working with the community. And we held some community engagement workshops in early August. And the community told us, and when I say community, these were residents, officers, staff, voluntary sector reps, say, we want to play a role. We want to help tackle and prevent COVID within Merton. What can we do? So we set up our Community Champions program. Anyone who lives or works in Merton can help us to share clear and consistent messages from the NHS, public health, can be a community champion. So far, we've got over 70. I think we had a Health and Wellbeing Board community subgroup on Tuesday evening, and at that time I was saying 60. So over the last 2 days, we've got another 10. And our community champions are, and some of them are on this call this evening, are from a range of backgrounds, and they cover the entire borough. We've got residents, we have councillors, service providers, we've got LBM officers, CCG officers, clinicians and more, tenants associations. This is a real positive for us. Next slide, please, Chris. And what they do, it's a really simple program, and if any of our community champions are on the call and they wanted to perhaps explain what they did or what they saw, we meet every single Wednesday. So Wednesday 12 till 1 and 7 till 8 p.m. we do a presentation and we share key messages. So it's the same messages I've just shared with you. And then we have a conversation and a detailed discussion about a key theme. So yesterday we had a discussion around mental health and well-being. So we provide those key messages, have a discussion on a Wednesday, and on a Friday we send out some resources. It could be a leaflet, it could be a WhatsApp message, it could be an infographic, and we also answer all the questions that the champions have asked us on the Wednesday. So we can give the information to those champions who then, very simply, forward them onto their networks. They might just forward the email to a friend, their workplaces, their cricket club, their rugby club, their faith group and faith settings. And then they come back on the next Wednesday and say, tell us how it went. It's a real strong way about how we can have a dialogue with the community and we can listen to the great ideas that they have around increasing the reach of our prevention programs. Next slide, please, Chris. I think this is the final slide from me. This is very much about how to register. So the link to register to become a community champion is there, but also contact us. So contact us at the public health email address, myself, Barry Causer at merton.gov.uk, or Una. And like I say, we have a drop-in session every Wednesday. This week we spoke about mental health. Next week we're talking about engagement and enforcement. So we've got Nick Stevens from the Regulatory Services Partnership talking about the engagement and businesses and how they can be compliant with the guidance. But really pleased that Roger Aditi from the Metropolitan Police Force is also attending to give us an oversight on enforcement. So we're going to have a really interesting conversation and discussion with our champions there. My big ask for the community forum and colleagues around the table tonight is to really ask your friends, family, networks and communities to join our network of community champions. Getting the messages out about our services is the key for us right now. So sign up to the council newsletter for COVID-19, join our community champions. Okay, I think that might be my last slide. Chris is the one, it's just my contacts. Thank you for listening. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Barry, for that excellent presentation. Chris, could you clarify? I saw there was a question came in. Are we able to? It's a short question. Can I just put it to Barry?
There's a couple of questions for Barry. Yes.
Yeah.
Firstly,
you want to do it, or should I do it?
I'm happy to do that if that's okay, Chair.
I can see them, Chris. Shall I go through?
Yeah, go for it, Barry.
I'll do my best. Where is the testing centre in Merton? The testing centre is at Merton College, but I need to reinforce that key message that all tests need to be booked via the national portal. Okay, it's really important. You cannot at this stage go to that testing centre without a booking to access a test. That might come in the future. But right now, you go to the portal or phone 119 and they have the live availability of those tests. Okay. The second question was from Councillor Fraser. Still limited face covering on public transport. What is the most effective way to get TfL ensuring that travellers adhere? It's a really good question, Councillor. We all need to comply with the guidance. I think the more people that do it, I think that's going to be more beneficial. We are able to work with our colleagues from TfL across London to reinforce those messages. It's always quite nice when I walk out of the Morden Tube station to see the stories on the board and it says, please wear a face covering. We need to constantly push this. But what I will do also, Councillor Fraser, I will ask that question and come back to you because I think that might be something that might comes up in our community champions discussion next Wednesday about engagement and enforcement. I hope that's okay. And then there's the second question from Councillor Fraser was about how self-isolation is monitored. If you are identified as a contact or of a positive case, you need to go, you'll be directed to a website and you then need to register and say that you will comply with that that guidance. And so again, I'm not that close to that detail. I don't know if Kath James, sorry, I know that Kath James is also on the call, is able to shed any further light on that, but I know that it's a self-assessment that you say that you are going to comply with that. But again, what I can do, colleagues, I can feed back within the notes and the minutes of that, just to be really clear with you, because I'd like to answer that for you, Councillor Fraser.
Chair, we've also had some questions in by email, but I think they're mainly for Stephen. Firstly, a question on AFC Wimbledon. Will residents and fans be able to see the stadium next month, or will they have to wait until next year? And the second question, if there's any update, or what's the latest update on the Mitcham Bridge on Bishopford Road?
Thank you for those two questions from the residents, Father Dr. Panels. I know that was the one on the test centre. Thank you. So with COVID, as we all know, attendance at sporting events, including football matches, is just not on. People will have to contact AFC Wimbledon. They're now based at Plough Lane, to see if there are tours of the ground, and I'm sure that may be possible, COVID permitting. But how many can you get on a tour, COVID permitting? So it will be very difficult. But please contact the football authorities there at AFC Wimbledon. But if you go onto their website or onto their Twitter pages, there's plenty of photos of the brand new stadium. Today they were putting in the goals. I mean, that is saying something. So the grass is laid, the grass is perfect, the stands are there, the seats are there, the dressing rooms are there, the 800 housing units that supported the application for the stadium are being built. But yes, it is quite a glory to behold. But please do get in touch with the football club itself. With regard to Bishopsford Bridge, so there has been a pause whilst we put in the planning application. That should go in this month, this October, provided everything is in order for the planning application. So people can have a look at that, can comment, can zoom in on the meeting and register to give comments on a brand new bridge for the residents of Ravensbury and all residents of the borough. Next month, November, we hope to allocate the contract for the rebuild of a brand new bridge, and that will be done in November. And everything going well, we hope to have a brand new bridge by the spring of next year. So it is progressing, it will happen. There will be a brand new bridge, Bishopsford Bridge, in spring of next year. But you will see activity in November as the contractors move in. Thank you.
We've also had a couple of questions come in by voicemail, which is a new one. We haven't had that before, but that's great. And hello to Joyce if she's watching. Firstly, one for Barry about if you know how many have benefited from the 2020 fitness exercise program involving the Mitcham Mile Round Fig Marsh. And this is from someone who's felt a lot better as a result of doing it and wanted to thank us for that.
I don't know how many people have participated, but I'm really pleased to hear that. Being more physically active makes us feel better about ourselves. It also brings us to closer with people safely. So I'm really pleased to hear that feedback.
And then perhaps Stephen might know this, but other councillors might as well, what the arrangements will be for Remembrance Sunday this year.
So we want to honour the fallen, First World War, Second World War, and we have always done this, and all local authorities have done this, and residents have been a major part of our Remembrance Sundays and our actual 11th of November Remembrance Day. So we're taking advice from the government, from 10 Downing Street, from the Cabinet Office about this year, and there may be a scaled down event, that is that we may be in a position to lay those loved poppies, remember them, and honour them in a way that that is saying to our residents who want to be part of that to be mindful and be safe as well. So it may not be the usual numbers in attendance from either the dignitaries, civic dignitaries, or the plea and the marketing to get people to turn up. But there will be information on our website. But we are taking our advice from the powers that be, the government, the Lord Lieutenant's Office, and the British Legion.
Thank you. That's all we've got at the moment, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I think we can now then move on to agenda item 4, emissions-based parking charges consultation. I'm going to ask Ben to actually present that. Ben.
You're on mute, Ben.
Okay, sorry, the mute button. In a moment, I will be giving a presentation, giving some of the detail. But first of all, Kath James will be giving an overview. So if I can pass over to you, Kath.
Thank you, if that's okay, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to really set the scene before Ben goes into the detail of the proposals and really seek to highlight 3 key areas that the consultation is seeking to provide some clarity around. Firstly, why are we consulting on charges and why now? The second point is around COVID and the impact that that's had on transport and travel around London. And the third point is really about the suggested approach that we have set out in the consultation. So taking the first point, which is why now, the answer is, well, we always planned to come out to consultation on this. When we went out to the consultation on the parking charges 18 months ago, we anticipated that the council would want to consult further, specifically around emissions. And at that time, we weren't able to introduce a policy because we didn't have the technology to support that. That position has now changed. And indeed, many of the residents who replied, and indeed motorists, steered us towards wanting to look at emissions for the future. They said they wanted something a little less blunt than just the flat charging. And they wanted a recognition about the real emissions that come from vehicles and that the charges should be based on that rather than just a straight diesel levy and a flat-based charging system. The second issue really is around why are we doing this? And really it's because the policy objectives of the council haven't changed. We still need to improve air quality around the district. As the leader mentioned earlier, there's been the recent adoption of the climate change plan, and also because of the public health benefits and measures that come with this, of encouraging people to adopt more sustainable transport, to tackle diabetes, obesity, and some of the other ways in which we can encourage people to get active. So in essence, we're now able to undertake a bit more of a sophisticated approach to charging for parking and for permits, which is now really based around the polluter pays principle. Again, as I said, this was a clear message that came back to us from the last consultation. The new proposals recognise that some vehicles pollute more than others. And in fact, some diesel vehicles are less polluting than some of the older petrol vehicles. And that's been taken care of and recognised in what Ben will go through in more detail in a short while. The second point really relates to COVID. A lot of people will tell us, well, hang fire, because public transport is very different at the moment. The world has changed. Before COVID, we had very high levels of car usage within the borough. Very quickly following lockdown, that position completely reversed. There was less public transport available, and a lot of people said, well, if we don't have a car, there's no means of getting about at the moment. But during that lockdown, we saw far greater usage of cycling, lots more people walking, and that wasn't just in Merton, but that was across London. Obviously, since some of those restrictions have eased, that position has changed yet again. And recent figures from Transport for London show that traffic levels are 153% of what they were at pre-COVID levels. That's not the case in inner London, but that's certainly the case in outer London. And we do expect at some point to get through COVID, although we're not quite sure when that will be. And following that, we would expect to see a greater uptake of people engaging again in using the facilities and public transport. COVID withstanding, we do need to plan for the future. We delayed the consultation. Cabinet originally agreed for the proposals to go out to consult with the public in the spring of this year. But we wanted to allow time because of the COVID situation and get to a point where we felt that the consultation would be more meaningful. And my last point really is in conjunction to the approach. And I think it's really important to be clear that the approach we're adopting actually builds on what we consulted on before and what we agreed. The model adopts PTAL, or public transport accessibility levels, at its foundation. And it talks about whether people enjoy or don't enjoy good access to public transport, and we are mindful of that. The second point is around the duration of the controlled parking zones. And then what the emissions-based charging does in particular is adds to that foundation the polluter pays principle. The other key point to note is that we are seeking to use the powers that we have at our disposal. We don't have a multitude of powers in this area. A common question we will often get is, well, what are you going to do about the people that drive through the borough? And unfortunately, there's not a lot we can do about people who drive through the borough. But what we can do is engage with and set a policy that relates to people who do park and who do buy permits within Merton. We want to use those powers proportionately. As I said, we don't have many at our disposal, but it's really important that we can affect those policy changes around climate change, around air quality, and indeed around the public health agenda. We want to make things simpler for the motorist where we can. And we also want to build on the approach of the London Mayor and the success of the ULEZ scheme within London. It is a less blunt approach. We do think that what we are proposing is more understandable and proportionate when you look at it around the polluter pays principle. I think my final point really is to say that this is a consultation. We are listening, and any views that we get this evening from the other community forums, from the equalities engagement that we're currently involved with, and anybody who comes onto our website or writes into us, we will be collating all of those views, and this will be brought together and back to the Council Scrutiny Committee in early December, and then onto the Cabinet in January 2021. And now I'd like to hand over to Ben, who has got some slides to go through some more of the detail around those proposals, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. Chris is loading it up. Excellent. Okay, so next slide, please. So these slides are standalone in a way, but Kath has spoken to them. So I will move through them quite swiftly, but pick up on some more poignant points about how the charging structure works. So what is being proposed? We're going to talk about the polluter pays principle. Why? I mean, there is the climate change, there's air quality, and there's the public health agenda again, and I'll touch on those in a bit of detail. How the proposals work, so how we're linking that to ULEZ or the car tax bandings that you may be familiar with, and how we deal with CO2 charging. And Kath has mentioned it quite clearly that this is a consultation. Nothing has been decided at this stage. We do want to hear views of residents, motorists and businesses within the borough, I will give you some details on how you can make your representations. Okay, next slide, Chris, please. Okay, so very simply, polluter pays. So if you have a clean vehicle that doesn't emit many emissions at all, in principle, the charge for your permits and your on or off street parking activity will be cheaper than if you have a highly polluting car, which emits, a high amount of pollutants. You will pay more. It is as simple as that in principle, and I'll come on to the detail of how that works in a second. But this does apply to all permits, so that's business permits, residential permits, trade permits, and teacher permits. We do have a variety of permits to serve the needs of those that need a permit to park, and also for on and off street parking. And that terminology means on street is very typically a pay and display bay outside of a high street shop, and off street we refer to as a car park, a typical car park. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so there's some details here, and the climate change emergency that we're looking to build upon. Within that document, there is a commitment to looking at emission-based charging. 19% of carbon emissions do come out through vehicles driving in the borough, so that is a significant percentage. Air quality, again, this is something that's been, very widely reported upon. NOxes is something you may not have necessarily heard of. CO2 emissions very much deals with what happens to the climate change, and NOx emissions and particulate matter, they will affect your heart, your respiratory problems as well come from this. People suffering with asthma, for example, may be more greatly affected. And this science and this data is becoming more and more clear as the years go by. And there is a startling figure there of 9,000 premature deaths are attributed to poor air quality in London. So air quality, again, very high on the agenda, and public health. We do want to make walking and cycling an easy option. The health benefits are getting more and more widely known. And so we're trying to champion that as well. And we think alternatives to using the car as your first choice will go a way to improving the public health throughout the whole borough. Okay, next slide, please, Chris. Okay. So what are the outcomes, really? What are we aiming to achieve here? So we would like more use of sustainable modes of transport. We are mindful at the moment with COVID, of course, use of public transport isn't as easy, but this is a medium to long-term strategy that we have, and sustainable transport is key in this. We want to improve the health outcomes. I've just touched on that. Diabetes, obesity, etc. They are all key matters that our public health colleagues are really fighting and working really hard to make a change upon. And linking up with them is part of this strategy. Air quality I've touched upon. Kath again is the carbon emissions, and that links very closely to climate change and the emissions that come out there. Increased uptake of ultra-low emission vehicles. So these are your electric vehicles or potentially hybrid. And what we are also doing in conjunction with this to make the choice of your car easy, we have increased the number of electric charging bays in the borough significantly over the last year to 18 months. And I know there is a huge further expansion over the next year or so to have an infrastructure that allows electric vehicles to be parked on the high streets, or not on the high streets, yeah, on the high streets to charge, and actually in residential areas as well. So you can park outside your house or near your house and be able to charge as well, because we appreciate not everybody has got a driveway to put their car on of an evening, for example. And all these actions we hope make people think about Do they jump in the car or do they walk or cycle? So we want to reduce those car journeys. And actually, if people can get rid of the car totally, that reduces their temptation. So that is our aim. We would like less cars on the road and more cycling and walking to take place. One of the other things to make it a little bit easier is car clubs. Sorry, Chris, thank you. Is use of car clubs. So if you're only using your car, example, for once or twice a week or rarely, you are paying the insurance and the tax and what have you. There are a number of car clubs in the borough now. They are quick and easy to use, and they are an alternative to owning a car, particularly if you don't use it too often, which is, you know, one of the arguments that we hear, that I don't use my car very often, but I'm being charged quite a lot. So it's food for thought, and your choices that are made, the car clubs could be an alternative to that. Okay, next one now, please. Okay, so how does it work? Kath talked about the location and so that's point one. So if you live near very good transport links, your current charges for parking or having a permit in that area are slightly higher than in areas where it's less well served by public transport. And again, the controlled zone, some are for an hour long, some are for, I think it's 15 or 16 hours in a day. You would pay slightly more for one that's enforced for a long period and slightly less for one that's enforced for a shorter period. So that's the basis, and that's what we've got at the moment, and that was implemented in January this year. What we're looking to introduce is a carbon dioxide emission charge. This is based on your tax disc. So you'll realise over the last few years that if your car is quite a clean car, your tax for that vehicle will be cheaper than a neighbour maybe that's got a bigger, more polluting vehicle, and they would pay more for their car tax. And we have based it on that principle, on your permit charge. Your car will pay less if it gives out less emissions for your permit, and it will pay more if it's more polluting. So it is aligned to the tax disc, and hopefully people are familiar with that and understand that concept. Point three there, we currently have a diesel levy charge as a blunt tool or blunt instrument, as Kath mentioned it. And the science and the information about diesel vehicles and the emissions from diesel vehicles has changed. And TfL have recognised this in the last few years, and that's the basis of their ULEZ charge. That's the ultra low emission zone charge. And so, for example, a newer diesel, I'll be repeating what Kath says, but it's a very important point. A newer diesel wouldn't be liable to this surcharge because the engine technology is much improved and the emissions is given out is not significant. However, there are going to be some older petrol vehicles on the road. At the moment, they wouldn't be liable to the diesel, of course, because it's petrol, but actually that vehicle is polluting in a dangerous way. And so that vehicle would be liable to the ULEZ charge. And finally, point four there, again, the ULEZ charge will be based for individual parking sessions, not permits. That's point three. Point four is about when you park on a high street, for example, or in a car park. If you're parking with a polluting vehicle that doesn't meet ULEZ charges, there will be a payment to be made on top of your normal parking charge. I'll come on to that, but that's £1.50. But of course, if your vehicle's clean and it meets the ULEZ standards, there would be no additional surcharge. Okay, so next slide, please. So with all that, the principle, here's a detail. So if you happen to own an Audi A1, 1 litre vehicle registered in 2017, and you lived in a tier 2, so that's average links to local transport, and it was enforced for, let's say, 5 or 6 hours a day, you would have a charge, and that charge is currently £110. However, the vehicle the Audi A1 is pretty good. It doesn't emit too many. So that would actually only be 90 pounds for the new charge. So that is a reduction. Of course, if you've got a diesel and a polluter, that would go up. But in this example, we're £20 cheaper. In every case, we would see if the vehicle meets a ULEZ standard. This happens to be a Euro 6 rated vehicle. Therefore, it meets all the ULEZ standards and there would be no charge. So even if this was a diesel vehicle, but it's not, then there would have been no charge. And in this example, it's £20 cheaper than the current permit price. So it has gone down. But of course, it may go down more or go up depending on the vehicle, but it's just an example. Example 2 is again just reiterating that the parking on street or in the car park is a one-off charge of £1.50 if your vehicle does not meet the ULEZ standard. So if it would be £1 an hour, you would pay the £1. However, if your vehicle was a more polluting one, the actual charge would be another £1.50 on top of that. And we hope that will make people think about their journeys and their choices each time they use their vehicle. Okay, next slide, please, Chris. Okay, so we're not doing this alone. On the right-hand side of the screen, as you look, there's probably a dozen there, maybe 13 authorities that have an emission-based charging structure of some form in London. I know that's increasing, and there's others that are considering and consulting on this. So the principle is there, and it is long-standing. Transport for London, they've introduced the ultra low emission zone. So again, we're familiar with that. So London-wide, this is happening. And there was a 65% reduction in the number of older and more polluting and non-compliant vehicles in the first 6 months when the zone came in. It did make a difference. And of course, that change in the centre of London does filter out. So we are seeing some changes. And the expansion is going to go to the South Circular as well. So again, that's getting closer to us. So we hope through the actions of TfL that will have some bearing, some change as well. But we need to work on partnership and make sure this is throughout London as a whole, and we work together. And again, I touched on the familiarity of the vehicle tax bandings that you've been used to over the last few years. And that logic and that approach is something you're familiar with. Okay, next one. Okay, Barry spoke in detail about COVID and what's changing. This slide is about 7 to 8 days old, and I've got a figure of 110% there of vehicle usage compared to pre-COVID levels. That's gone up in the recent weeks. So the activity on street in outer London is certainly significant again already. Again, this is a medium to long-term strategy, so we do bear this in mind, we take this into consideration. But yeah, it's certainly people are using their cars again quite quickly. Okay, next slide. Thank you. Again, can't reiterate it enough, it is a consultation. It started, I think, in the first week of September. It closes on the 23rd of October, so that's another 2 or 3 weeks. I do ask you to go to our webpage, Merton Council's homepage, and there is a big button there saying emission-based charging consultation. You can't really miss it. Frequently asked questions. We have a questionnaire, tick box questionnaire in there, which is really helpful for us to gather a lot of data in a structured way. But also there's some free text opportunities in there if you want to write more and express your views, whether it's for or against the proposals, or give us some ideas. In addition to that, if you don't want to go via the web, you can write to us. The address is there at the Civic Centre, or you can email us direct. It is your choice, but and again, just to reiterate the timescale for this. After the 23rd of October, my job is to formulate a report, taking into consideration all the representations, all the comments that have been made, and that gets presented to committees, and they'll go through the democratic process where decisions will be made. So I think the first meeting is looking at December, and then over the following months, meetings will be advertised and taken, and decisions throughout that period. So that's the end of my presentation. Hopefully between Kath and I, we'll be able to answer any questions for you.
Chris, have you got the questions?
Yeah, so we've got one here in the Zoom chat. How many residents are going to be impacted in A, Mitcham, and B, Wimbledon? As first question. How do the new charge compare to the rest of London? Where will Merton rank on that? Will it be high or low? And is this going to penalise poor or elderly residents who can't afford to buy newer cars?
Okay, I can certainly pick up on the first two, and I can maybe touch on the third, but maybe Kath could come in on the third one. I don't know the exact figures. What I do know exactly is that there are 20,000, I think it's 19,500 permits sold, residential permits sold within the borough. The vast majority is in the Wimbledon area. And of course, Colliers Wood, Rains Park have significant CPZs. There are less controlled parking zones in the Mitcham area, and the permit charges are obviously linked to where there are controlled parking zones, because you buy a permit to park in the parking zone. I can come back and provide those details, but the most congested areas with controlled zones are Wimbledon, Rains Park, Colliers Wood, through the centre there. But yeah, I can certainly provide that number of permits per CPZ. That is data that we have that we're happy to share with you to do exact numbers. How will the new charges compare? There really is a mixed bag of charges by different authorities. You know, we are potentially cheaper than some in our most least polluting vehicles, and some of the charges are going to be, you know, certainly in comparison with other boroughs throughout London. As I say, this is a London-wide problem, and we're not just comparing ourselves to the Suttons and other outer boroughs. We're looking at what Wandsworth are doing, and actually what Central London is doing, because we need to do this as a whole. So the charges are varied in what we've got, from a low number to a more challenging amount, but that is in comparison to other boroughs and the range and different types of charges that they propose as well. Kath, I don't know if you want to come in on that last point of that we've done the equalities assessment and yeah.
No, I could pick up on that, and just building on what Ben just said. Obviously, we undertook a full equalities assessment before Cabinet took the decision to go out to consultation, and indeed we're running a number of focus groups at the moment with all of the different equality groups across the borough, and that would be with groups such as Age UK and Age Merton, and you know, also with the Citizens Advice Bureau, who have raised the point about, you know, what about if people can't buy newer cars? And we're looking at things like car clubs. So, you know, you may not be able to buy a new car, but you might be able to look at a better combination of more sustainable and active travel, alongside, if you do need a car for longer journeys, of potentially looking at car club usage. I think it's been said by previously that, you know, we do feel that the emissions-based charging scheme is a fairer scheme. It does, you know, and to some degree, it does need to generally nudge behaviour and to change the way that people currently engage with public transport and use cars within the borough. But what we are going to try to do is to look at ways in which we can mitigate or minimise as best we can that the policy wouldn't be exclusive to somebody who's on a certain economic income or within a certain age category.
Just one more thing on building on that. Some of the things that are not changing, which I think is significant. If you're a blue badge holder or you're a carer, we currently, those permits are given for free. There is absolutely no charge, and there is no intention to change or even consider that. So those that say care and have mobility issues or problems, holder of blue badges, and they need a permit for their vehicle, that will still remain free of charge. The other point is there are a number of free parking bays for up to 20 minutes within the borough. Again, there is no consideration in these proposals at all to change that. I mean, that supports the high street, not the high streets, the local shopping parades. And again, there's no discussion to change that as well. And also in our car parks, there are fees that are reduced, discounted amounts for local residents and local workers if they need to buy a season ticket within our car parks. Again, those discounts will still apply. There's no proposed to change them.
Thanks. On YouTube, hi John, who's been using the chat function there. He's made a few points over there, but there's a couple of questions to pick up. He's made the point that if he's got a diesel car that's parked on his driveway, it doesn't seem fair that they're not penalised, but someone who parks on the road is going to have to pay quite a high price for that. And also he's made the point that given there's a lot of money being invested in active travel, is there a way of getting cyclists to pay rather than motorists?
Okay, so one of the things, and the scenario of someone having a driveway, somebody not having a driveway, well, absolutely, we have heard that, and we do accept that, but the council has limited powers in what it can do. We have the power to charge for parking and for permits as well, and what we do, we can only address those. We would like to work with TfL about through traffic as well, and that's something else we would like to address, but we can't. So we have the limited powers, and absolutely, if you park on the driveway, yes, you won't be liable to the charge, but we do not have the powers as a local authority to do anything about that. We're taking the action where we can, and we believe it's fair, and we believe it's proportionate in what we're doing. Cyclists to pay, that's well, it's I'd put that in your representations. It's an interesting one, and we are looking to encourage and to develop that and invest. We believe it's a more sustainable, healthier way to move around. So I don't believe there's any plans for any form of charging, but I will take your comments.
There's a couple of broader questions on parking, Ben, perhaps you can help. Again, from John, asking why parking wardens were considered essential workers during the lockdown. And then also in the chat, I'm trying to click buttons, excuse me, sorry, from Councillor Henry about pavement parking and if more can be done to address that. Okay,
so the reason why traffic wardens, parking attendants, civil enforcement officers, they're called quite a bit. It was vital during that COVID period that the vehicles could move around the borough safely and quickly. If people were parking on corners or in cul-de-sacs, we would not have been able to get the food packages or the medicine or the assistance to those people that need it. So when it happened, we did concentrate our sort of resources in key areas to ensure traffic flow was key. Disabled bays were remained used for disabled people, and people weren't leaving their vehicles where they could. some of the busier permit areas where parking is very limited. There needed to be spaces there so people can come and visit and give care or give support. So we did consider them to be key workers during that period for those reasons. Again, so pavement parking, it is a London-wide restriction unless there are some local rules or signs saying that you can park on there. If there is a problem in your road or in a certain area, do contact us, do ring parking services. We can go out. We aim to get there within 30 minutes during the core hours. If it's a regular event, we can certainly put that on our schedule and we'll go back on a regular basis rather than you having to ring up. But, you know, it's not permitted. We will go there. We will enforce. We just need to know those details. And if you could provide them, we'll do all that we can.
That is, Chris?
Okay, that's all we have at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, thanks, Ben and Catherine, for your excellent presentations. And we look forward to the consultation process and the final outcome in due course.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Shall we now move on to agenda item 5, Cannons Heritage Project? And I'm going to ask Amy to actually, Amy, are you there?
Yeah, hi there. Hi, everyone. So my name is Amy and I'm the new Community Engagement Officer for the Cannons Regeneration Project in Mitcham, a project I'm sure you're all well aware of. And thank you for having me here tonight at Mitcham Community Forum. Okay, so I wanted to start off the presentation by saying a bit about myself and also just a quick overview of the project before we go into a bit of a tour of the house and grounds, because I know that a lot of you can see at the moment is a lot of fencing. So I thought it might be nice to be able to show you what's going on behind all that fencing. So I started in my role in August and I've had a great and really busy first couple of months. As you'll be able to see if you're in the area, there's a lot of building and landscape works going on. So I've been working with the contractors on those works. But I've also had a chance to meet lots of people at the Heritage Day and also via different meetings. And that's been great, but I'm really looking forward to meeting more people soon. Right, so if we could go to my next slide then, please. So just quickly about the project, because I think most of you will be aware about it. So it's a £4.4 million project funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund and the National Lottery Community Fund. And it's led by Merton Council. The project team comprises Alison Plant, who's the project manager, and myself, the community engagement officer. But we also work really closely with various community groups in the area. So we work really closely with Friends of the Cannons, Mitcham Cricket Green Community and Heritage, and the Mitcham Society, as well as other community groups. Thank you. Right, so talking about the building works, our contractor for this is called Buxton, and they are due to complete in spring 2021. What they're up to, so they're restoring the facade of the house, they're creating new business space on the ground and first floors in the house, and they're creating a new heritage and community space on the basement floor. There's also going to be a brand new cafe, which will be attached to Madeira Hall, new public toilets. Also, they will be repairing the dovecot. Thank you. So I'm just going to show you some design visuals for the building so it can bring it a bit more to life for you. So the first one we have here, so this view is from the west lawn. So this is if you're approaching Cannons from Cricket Green. So on our right, we have Cannons House, and then on our left, we have Madeira Hall. And then the new structure we can see there is the new cafe. You can see here that how it's much more open compared to how it used to be. Also, we can see the wall that's attached to Cannons House. That's going to be our new community wall. So stay tuned for some information about that. I'll talk about that at the end. Okay, thanks, Chris. Okay, and so this view is of Cannons House on the left, cafe on the right, and also the walled garden. So we can see how it's all linked up. So we've got some new pathways going all around the site. So a real feeling that will be created is a sense of joining up all the different elements of Cannon's House and Grounds. Thank you. This last one's of the cafe. So as you can see, there'll be indoor and outdoor seating. And just a note on the cafe is that it will be let to an external company. And my colleague Alison is in the process of working on that. Thank you. Right, so we're going to do a real whiz through the building because I thought it might be nice to do a tour as if you're kind of there. So first slide, please, Chris. So here we are with Madeira Hall on the left. These photos were taken yesterday, so they're very fresh. This is how it looks right now. So Buxton have been getting on with the foundations for the new cafe. That's what we can see in the left-hand picture. And in the right-hand picture, we can see a bit of demolition. So this is where the old toilet blocks and changing rooms were. They were attached to Cannon's house and they are no longer. Okay, next slide. So just moving around quickly to the dovecot. So the team started working on that last week. They're doing essential repairs to the roof and there'll be new tiling as well for that. The situation with that is that they'll be getting some materials for it next week and then they will be able to start the rebuild. Thank you. Right, so we're going into the house now and so you can see on the image on the left, they're the old stairs and we've just got some temporary stairs up now. So they will be rebuilt. And on the right-hand side, we've got our entrance. So if we could step in through the front door, please, Chris. So this room is the first one you go into on the right-hand side. This room will be kept as a community room. So I believe it will be available for renting for different community events. It's a really beautiful room because it's got the view out onto the pond. So you can see here and in lots of the other pictures, there's lots of cabling coming down from the ceiling because that's the stage we're at now with the electrics going in. Also in this room, we can see how the fireplace is exposed and also the really nice windows, as there'll be lots of work going onto those to restore them to how they used to look, as with the ceiling as well, actually, in this room. Okay, so next slide, please. Right, so now we're going to the left. We can see here another fireplace that's been exposed. So this is something that we've been really happy about through the project so far, is how we've been able to peel back some of the plasterboard and find these original features, which will definitely be part of the interior design. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so we're going up the stairs and through the first room on your left. Next slide, please. So again, here we can see more fireplaces exposed. You can see that throughout the house, there is no flooring really in place at the moment, so it's very much still a construction site. Actually, so on the left here, I have a better image of it coming up, but the contractors believe that the beam that you can see on your left in the floor may have been repurposed from an old ship, and that could be linked to the Cranmers, who are the people who owned the house. So they were linked to the East India Company and were merchants. So we believe that it could have come from a ship. And so you can see that by the way that these beams are bowed and also because of the bolt holes. So they're really interesting features and we'll be able to talk about those in the interpretation for the house. Okay. So this room is directly above the front door. So unfortunately, it was damaged in an arson attack in the 90s. And so, but we can see here that there are still the original features there. And so we'll be working on conserving those. Thank you. Here we have the next room along, and this room is full of these original panels, which were just behind old plasterboard. So we've had archaeologists coming along and they will be, I don't think we've got the final date yet, but they will be dating when they think this paneling was first created. Thank you. Right, we're going down the stairs now to the new heritage and community space. So I've taken this photo here on the right because this is actually a new lift. So not that, but this is where the new lift is going, which is really important because it means that Cannon's house will be accessible So for wheelchair users, they'll be able to enter the house through the basement and then use the lift to gain access to the other floors. So that's something that wasn't in place before and is a really essential feature of the new design. Thank you. Right, and then this is the basement. So this was one big space before, and we can see here that the stud work for the new walls has gone in. So the image on the left, these will be the new toilets for the space, and on the right, these are partitions. So we've got multiple different rooms in the centre. It should make it a lot more useful for users. Thank you. Okay, so here's a close-up of that beam I was talking about on the first floor that we think was repurposed from an old ship. Thank you. Right, so the landscape works are being carried out by a company called Till Hill, and they are due to complete in early January 21. They are working on restoring the walled garden, so the brickwork, and there'll be a new planting scheme in there. New car park, historic running track will be restored. The pond will be restored, and so that involves dredging it, adding a new liner, refilling it, and adding new planting. We've also got a brand new community garden and a brand new playground. Thank you. Right, so here are just a couple of visuals for the landscape, just to bring it to life a bit for you. So this is how the community garden will look. So we're working at the moment on plans for how we can get people involved with this space. So that's a bit of a watch this space kind of thing, but I'll be responsible for managing that. We can see here that we've got space for ornamental plants. So the bigger beds have ornamentals in, and the smaller beds, they've got edibles in. So we'll be able to have a really nice link here with the community garden and the cafe. Also, I think it's great because this will be users of the leisure centre will be walking past this space as they park their car and then enter the leisure centre. Thank you. And this is the new play area. So this was designed by local school children and hosted by Cranmer Primary School. So the children were completely essential in this design, and I believe that this is really close to actually what the children came up with in the sessions. So we can see here, we've got some pigeon towers that were inspired by the dovecot and lots of fun, inventive climbing apparatus. The area at the back, the smaller towers, that's for smaller children, and the area at the front is for bigger children. Thank you. So landscape works, how was it looking yesterday? So here over at the running track, we have the first pile of surfacing. This is for the pathways going all around the site. And then the picture on the right, this is the surfacing for the running track itself. So we're hoping that this area will be open to the public by the 1st of November. This is weather dependent because there's constrictions to do with laying the surfacing when it's wet. Also, we have some grass and wildflower seeds that have been put down. So we need to play a bit by ear with that, but we're hoping 1st of November to be able to take down the fencing and open this back up to the public. Okay, so this is where the new playground is going to go. Next slide, please. And this is a series of images of the new community garden. So I'm really happy with this. My background is in community food growing projects. So I found this really, really exciting element of the site-wide design. We can see here, so there's lots of different seating for people to be able to rest on the edges of the beds. Also, there's enough space for mingling and different heights of beds, which is really important because it means that the beds suit different needs for different users. Thank you. Okay, this next slide. So this is the entrance walking in from the car park through to the leisure centre. And I just wanted to show this because it's a part that I really love because of the restored brickwork here. So I believe this entrance was widened, but then it's been restored. And also this is just such a beautiful tree. This is the Dawn Redwood, one of lots of amazing trees on the site. Thank you. Right, so this is the pond. So it looks very muddy at the moment and it's been refilled the last couple of days because it's been so wet. So Till Hill at the moment are working on pumping water out of the pond because they need to get the new liner in. And obviously they can't do that whilst it's still full of water. So if you can imagine, this area will be a wildlife haven with lots of amazing planting going all around the edge of it. It's looking very muddy at the moment, so you do have to use your imagination a bit. But new liner, that will go in on the 14th of October, all going well. And then all the planting will be carried out in November and December. Thank you. Okay, so now we're going into the walled garden, or the secret garden, as I believe lots of people refer to it as. As I said before, there's a new planting scheme going in here, and we're working with the Friends of the Canons on that. So we'll be doing some community planting in here. There is existing planting in here at the moment, which we are looking to replant elsewhere on the site. So we won't be throwing away any plants that we see as of value. And the new planting scheme, we're aiming to be able to put it in by November. Thanks. Right, so there are all of my pictures. I hope that wasn't confusing in taking you around. And I hope it kind of clears it up a bit, because I'm really aware that, yeah, all you really see at the moment is a lot of fencing. So ways to get involved. So coming soon, this is what I'm working on at the moment, is the activity plan, because a big part of this project, as well as the capital works, is the community engagement. So as I said, I started in my role in August, and that was after quite a big gap between when the previous community engagement officer left in January. In that gap, a lot's happened. Obviously, we've had a pandemic to contend with. And so the activities that were proposed, not all of them are suitable for now. I will be able to adapt some of them, but I really need to start thinking about what I can deliver in this situation in the next 6 months, and what we can deliver after that going forward, and being really optimistic. As well as activities, there will be lots of volunteering opportunities. So that's another thing I'm working on at the moment, is thinking of different volunteer roles and how I can reach out to people in the community about the various volunteering opportunities that will be available. So best way to contact me at the moment, I would say, is if you go for the email address, because I haven't got a newsletter out yet, but if you send me an email, I'll put you on the mailing list, and that will be the best way for me to get into contact with you. And I really hope to do that within the next couple of weeks, is to get the first one out. Also, we've got the website. So if you go on it now, you will see that maybe it's a little bit out of date, and you would be right, but I am working on getting that up to date. So please keep checking that. Also, there is a messaging function on there, so you will be able to get in touch with me via the website. Instagram should be getting that up and running again soon, and also Facebook. But I would say for now, the best way to get in touch, and I'd love to hear from you, is by email, that info@thecanonsmitcham.co.uk email address. Okay, thank you very much for listening. Does anyone have any questions?
Good. Chris, over to you. Could we raise any questions?
Turn off mute. A point from Councillor Henry that she visited the site yesterday and was very pleased with the work so far. So well done.
That's great. Thank you so much, Joan. That's really nice to hear.
Can I was trying to write, but it might be quicker to say this. Thanks very much, Amy. I think the work you're doing is extraordinary. It's fantastic. I love gardening myself, and I just think it's going to be phenomenal. It was very comprehensive, what you said, and I look forward to seeing the end of it. And if I can help in any way, I will. This is Brenda. And I just want to ask one question. The hole that you mentioned looks, well, it looks as if it's going to be quite different, but you probably know that Merton doesn't have anywhere to have a function of more than, say, 200 people cramped in. So what's the capacity of that hall? Because you said you might be hiring it out.
Oh, so the function room on the ground floor of the house?
Yes.
I would say it would be a fairly small capacity. This would be a complete guess, but I would say about 30 people, perhaps. But we've got a lot more outside space than we do have indoor space. So we're definitely hoping to be able to have lots of events on both the east lawn and the west lawn, and also the cafe space. That could be a really good opportunity to hold community events and meetings there as well.
What I was thinking of, sometimes we have functions, call it functions. Like I had one for over 200 people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was looking at something like that because we don't really have anywhere big in Merton
Yeah.
to deal with that sort of situation. And you know, this is Britain, and the plane doesn't always tell us when it's coming. And so we can't be outside a lot, even though we'd love to. And that's why I was hoping it was going to be a bigger place.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. So unfortunately not inside the house. Going forward, we may be able to have things like marquees outside on the lawn. But at the moment, it's, yeah, the space indoors is fairly restricted. We've just got the larger outdoor space. So yeah, sorry about that. We wouldn't be able to accommodate.
It's not your fault. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a couple of questions on YouTube. One from Barbara. Hi, Barbara. The secret garden, apparently they call the Peace Garden, and she wondered why such a large piece of wall has been taken down by the obelisk opposite the church.
Okay. Yep. So that wall has been taken down, I believe, because, well, this was in the plans, because it didn't really fit with the conservation of the site, because it was a 60s wall. I think it was a 60s wall. So the plan is to remove the wall, and so to then replant where the wall was. And so it looks much more in keeping with the rest of the site. So there will be new planting going up there. So it won't be the large gap that you see now. Because I'm aware that people are concerned about the noise from the road and also the visibility. But there will be new planting going there, with just some corridors going through the planting so people can access the site from that corner. But it won't be left as exposed as it looks right now.
And then John had a question about the dovecote. Is it being restored or just a new roof, and will the tiles and slates be matched?
Yes, it will. So a lot of work is going into the dovecote. So they're working on it now, and the materials will be coming next week. The tiles will be matched. It will be a sympathetic restoration of the dovecote. And I'd be really happy to, if, did you say this person was called John?
Yeah.
If they're interested in being kept up to date with the dovecote, I can, if they drop me an email, I can send them pictures as we go, if that suits.
Great. I hope you got that, John and Barbara, over on YouTube. Okay, Chair, that's all the questions we have at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much.
Right. Thanks a lot, Amy. As Councillor Fraser says, it looks an excellent project, and I think it will be a great addition to Mitcham. It probably will also help with the next agenda that's coming up, which is item 6, local updates. And the first one is the Wilson. Now, why I said there may be some connection is because I think this building gives one a sense of well-being, and we need a lot of that over in the Mitcham area so that we can move further to close the gap between the east and the west. Chris, is there any feedback on the Wilson at the moment?
So yeah, we got a message from the South West London Clinical Commissioning Group. They say they are continuing to work with NHS Property Services and Merton Council colleagues to try and ensure they've got a deliverable project that best serves local people. They have promised to give us a more detailed update at our next meeting in February. So there was nothing substantial at this point in time, but they promised to come back to us in the new year.
Right, thanks a lot for that. So we look forward to them coming in February.
Yep.
This gives them quite a bit of time to get themselves sorted out.
Let's hope so.
And the final agenda item is the Rowan Community Facility. I picked up an email as I was coming to the meeting, but I think you probably have it already. The email from
That's right. So this is from James McGinley, who's the Assistant Director for Sustainable Communities, and he's leading on the negotiations to get the community facility built on the Rowan. So what he said is that Crest Homes have submitted a planning application with some minor amendments for the design, for some design changes to the doctor, surgery, chemist and community space. This is to reflect the final design and operational requirements for the surgery and to come in within their budget. James is trying to get a program from Crest on their build, and he'll send that out as soon as it's available. And subject to the approval of the minor amendments, they're aiming to start on site in January and February. but they'll confirm that construction timetable with James fairly shortly. So hopefully we'll have some very good news on that for our meeting in February as well. I've got one more little thing as well, Chair, if you indulge me for just a second.
Yeah.
At our last meeting, I presented some information about the boundary review. So the Local Government Boundary Commission for England was reviewing Merton's ward boundaries and had some changes for around Mitcham. They've announced their final proposals. These are available on their website, which is www.lgbce.org.uk. The proposals are pretty much the same as the version they consulted on earlier in the year. So there are no major changes to wards, but all of the wards in Mitcham have got roads moving in and out around the border. So worth checking out, particularly if you are close to the border of one of the wards at the moment. The proposals will now be put before Parliament, and if they're approved, they should be in place for the 2022 local elections.
Perfect. Thank you for that. I think that brings us to the end of the agendas and towards the end of the meeting. I want to thank everyone who's actually participated either as press presenters or as people who attended and made their valuable contributions. Our next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, the 25th of January of February. In the meantime, I wish you a safe journey. You're not going home, you're already home. So but I wish you a pleasant evening, and thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and you're welcome.